Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session on presentation skills, creating your presentation content and slides. My name is Swapnil Kamat. I have the lovely Arunima Kamat with me. How are you, Arunima Kamat?
Good. I'm fine. I'm glad we're finally starting with this session.
Yes, we have worked day and night on putting this content together for you. See, we've been in this business for like close to 12 years, right? So we have all this content which is ready in some form or the other. But every time we shoot a class for our communication coaching program, we want to give you the very best. So we go back to our content, we relook at it, we see if there are any latest best practices that are there that we can give you. So we do all of those things and we work very, very hard on every content piece that we put out. And of course, Arunima is the flag bearer of working hard on it. So and putting in her very best. So I hope you enjoy this topic. Arunima, you can go on to the Work Better logo and appear as you do usually to add comments and ask questions. So let's get started. So this topic is divided into two parts. The first part that it's divided into is structuring your content, how you go about doing that. And the second part that we're going to discuss is designing your slides. Now, I must mention here at this stage that this session is not about how to use a tool called PowerPoint. That's not what this session is about. You'll find that there can be a whole different session that we don't have as a part of the communication coaching program, but you can, it's much easier to figure that out of how to use the tool PowerPoint. PowerPoint itself has a lot of tutorials. We are talking about irrespective of whether you're using an Apple computer, whether you're using Canva, whether you're using PowerPoint, how do you go about designing your slides, right? What are the overall principles on that? So don't expect to learn tricks of PowerPoint here, though you'll be able to use PowerPoint very well after you study this topic with us, right? So this is the two kind of parts in which this topic is divided into. The first part is about how do you go about planning and structuring your content when you're making a presentation, when you're doing one-to-many communication with people. How do you go about planning and structuring your content? So let's set some context here, right? A great presentation is one which meets your objective, right? And that's what we've said about all business communication is about. Number one, understanding or being understood specifically clearly without any doubt. That's one kind of principle of effective communication. And number two of business communication is effective business communication is about objectives being met. And that's exactly what a good presentation is supposed to do. It's supposed to help you meet your objectives. This is achieved through structured presentations. Right now, for years when I would do classroom workshops with some of India's biggest companies, and I'd have very, very senior executives sit in the room trying to study the subject of presentation skills, I would often in their introduction ask them a question. And the question I would ask them is what's a great presentation, right? And they would give all kinds of answers, but nobody would ever say an effective presentation is one where your goal, purpose, or objective is met, right? And that's one of the reasons why they wouldn't end up making great presentations, because they wouldn't understand the core of business presentations, which is your objectives being met. In a well structured presentation, the message is crafted in a logical and simple way that allows the audience to keep up and take away key points, right? That's what structure and simplicity does to you, right? um, when you're sharing information on any subject, what you are giving it structure and making it simple makes it easy for the receiver to understand the message, and it becomes in turn easy for you to meet your objective, right? That's the point of making it structured and simple, logical and simple. If you don't do that structuring, you're making it difficult for the people in front of you to understand the topic and in turn meet your objective. It's that simple why you should structure your communication and not muddle it, right? That's, you don't want to muddle your presentations up. Research shows that audiences retain structured communication 40% more accurately than unstructured information. Now, every presentation is different and unique, hence there is no one way to structure a presentation, right? So we can't come here and tell you as a part of this session saying that okay, this is the only way to go about doing it. However, like we've discussed, in our opinion, the most business presentations can use the McKinsey pyramid model of doing it, right? It applies to most, not all, business presentation. So just keep that in mind. You're going to have to apply yourself in different situations and know how to structure it. However, always go back to the McKinsey one first and see whether that applies. I'll just make it simple for you. And I'm going to give you tons of examples of how in different contexts you can use McKinsey and really structure your presentation, structure your content beautifully there. Right now, when you are doing any sort of communication in business, whether it's a presentation, whether it's an email, whether it's a face to face meeting that you're doing, it's very important that you use this thing which is called the communication core, right? And you exactly, when you're thinking about your structure and you're putting your content together, again, you need to do the same thing, which is first start by giving thought to who am I presenting to. And we've spoken about this communication core in great detail in your first class, the communication fundamentals. And by the way, we hope that you'll keep revisiting each one of these classes, right? Because there's no better course in business communication than the one that you are doing, and you have that information handy with you. Very often, when we're speaking with our kids, we ask them, have you revised your portion? And if you're not going to revise on important topics like business communication, you're not going to get better at it. Revision and practice are the two pillars on which you are actually going to end up getting better, right? So coming back to this, you need to start by thinking about who am I communicating with, right? Give that a lot of thought about who is your audience. Then you think of why am I communicating, which means what is my objective, which means what action do I want the audience to take at the end of my presentation. You need to think of that. So you thought of the audience, you thought about what your objective is. Therefore, the third thing that you'll think of is, therefore, what should my content be? Right? So once I'm clear of the who, once I'm clear on the objective, what content should I put in this presentation? Once you're clear broadly on what the content is that you need to put in your presentation, then the next thing you think of, now how should I put that content across, right, to meet my objectives? Do I need visual aids? Do I need to, graphs, charts, visuals? What do I need to do so that my objective is met? And then of course the last thing that you need to think of, which is not as important as these first four, is when are you presenting, where are you presenting? So you can also give that some thought, right? So in one line, like I keep saying, for all business communication including presentations, to this audience, to meet my objective, what do I need to say and how do I need to say that? This is the one line that you can keep asking yourself. To this audience, think deeply about who the decision makers are in that audience, think of who the influencers are. To meet my objective, which is the why, what do I need to say to them and how do I need to say that, right? So that's something that you always need to give thought to. Right now, let's go back to something that you've learned in class number 2, which is the McKinsey pyramid model, which we're recommending that you use here while you're creating your content for business presentation. You're gonna start. So this presentation is got an opening, it's got a body, and it's got a conclusion. So what's the opening of your presentation? The opening of your presentation is where you make it clear to the audience as to what your objective is or what the final solution is that you're giving. You give an introduction and context, and we're going to get deeper into each one of these points for us to tell you how you can go about opening your presentation, what can you do in the body, what can you do at the end. We'll go into details there. So once you've made your objective clear or your final solution that you're giving clear, then you give an introduction and some context to the audience. Then you go into the main body of the presentation where you use 3 to maximum 4 to 5 points to really drive your objective or the final solution that you're presenting to them. Substantiate those points, right, with data, facts, statistics, examples, benefits, right? So you really substantiate what you're trying to say. And at the end of it, ladies and gentlemen, you conclude with some kind of a summary, summary questions, all those things is what you kind of conclude with, right? So this is the broad way in which you make your presentation content clear: opening, body of the presentation, and conclusion, right? And again, the McKenzie pyramid model fits perfectly in this opening, body, and conclusion, right? And we're going to give you tons of examples, so don't worry. Since we tell you to give examples to make something simple and clear to people, we're going to give you tons of them ourselves, right, for you to understand it. Now let's look at what you can put in the opening or the start of your presentation, right? So an impactful introduction and opening is where you introduce yourself and your organization, and especially to audiences that may not know you. Even if you're doing an internal presentation, for that matter, to an audience that doesn't know you, you may not have to introduce your organization, but it's always a good thing to introduce yourself to people that you don't know. The main point of introducing yourself and your organization well during a presentation is to build credibility, okay, in the eyes of the audience, right? You want to come across as a figure of authority on that subject. So anything that is going to help you build credibility, build authority, that's something that you need to do, right? So for example, I'll give you my own example. When I am often called to give a talk, or often when I have to do, say, a 2-day workshop, 3-day workshop with people, when I'm with a bunch of often very, very senior people, I always start with my introduction. And I make it a very visual introduction. I could probably show you that in storytelling, right? If you signed up for that class, an advanced presentation class on storytelling, I will share, those, how I do it, how I make it visual. So that is something that I do. I make a little bit of fun of myself in my introduction, so I crack a few jokes on myself as well, because then my introduction ends with me kind of building credibility, where I talk about all my achievements till date, all the media features that I've had, all the articles that I've written, all the kind of prestigious places that I've gone and spoken at. So I'll always talk about that right at the start of my presentation, because I want to build credibility and in the eyes of the audience, right? If they're going to be listening to me teach them on the subject of leadership or managing change or communication, they need to know who's teaching them. And me, when I build that credibility right at the start, they know I'm a figure of authority, and then they tend to listen to me way better than they would if I didn't introduce myself in that fashion to them, right? So that's the kind of point of doing it. And of course, if somebody doesn't know the organization that you belong to, it makes a lot of sense for you to introduce yourself and your organization again in a way where you're building credibility and authority, because you want them to listen to you, and that's not going to happen unless that authority is built, right? So then you do some kind of a, set the context of what you're going to talk about, and then use some attention grabbers is what you can do right at the start of your presentation, right? um, while presenting in front of an audience that doesn't know you, it's important to introduce yourself and your organization. This helps to build an immediate relationship between you and your audience. It also lets you briefly clarify your expertise and position. This is something that we just spoke about. Include a concise slide that highlights some key points about you and the company that you're representing, right? So put it up there on the slide for people to see it. And this is something which is very important. Do not feel shy about talking about yourself or your organization at this stage. A lot of y'all may feel shy or feel like y'all are tom-tomming about yourself. And is that an appropriate thing to do? Yes, when you're talking to one to many people and they don't know you, that is extremely important for them, for you to do, so that they take the contents of your presentation more seriously. You're not doing it because you like talking about yourself. You're doing it so that the objective that you have of that presentation is met. Okay, now set the context. What can you do in setting the context in the introduction? Introduce the topic and explain it briefly. State your presentation purpose, objective, and provide a statement of what you're hoping the outcome of the presentation will be, right? So this is something that we've spoken about. Outline what you will be talking about. More formal presentations or trainings, you can also introduce an agenda slide. So let me just speak about this very. So great presentations, in my opinion, is one where the speaker makes it very clear right at the start as to what his objective is. Okay. Now, let me give you an example right off the bat here of what I mean by what the objective of the presentation is. So typically, if I'm doing a presentation skills workshop in a classroom, right, and I have 2 days with people, I often end up starting the presentation by telling them that, hey guys, my objective during these 2 days, we have some 20 hours to spend together nonstop, and my objective during these 20 hours is to get each one of y'all at least 50% better at presenting than when you started today, right? That's what my objective is. It's very, very clear. My objective is not to finish some portion because we're not in school. That's not my objective. We're here for 16, 20 hours, 18 hours. I want to ensure that you're at 50% better at the end of those probably 18, 20 hours that we're spending together. I make it very, very clear to them, right? So that is what you can do. Now, often I've given this example. When you talk about purpose, objective, or provide the solution, like we spoke about in the McKenzie principle, you can make the objective clear to the audience like this. You can say, today I'm here to talk about why we should move our corporate head office from Bombay to Pune. That's what I'm here to talk about, right? So you've made your objective very, very clear of this is what I'm here to talk about. You could also say, today I'm here to talk about the problems that we as an organization have faced over the last 3 months, the major problems in our department, and what the potential solutions are to each one of those problems. That's what we're here to talk about, right? So you need to make your objective clear at each point of time, right at the start. And the more you do that in your introduction, the more your audience is going to like your presentation, right? If you're making a sales presentation, if you're at a client's end, introducing, maybe you can't say that. You can say, today I'm here to introduce my company to you, and hope that we can start working together at the end of my presentation, at the end of this meeting, right? That's what I'm here for. So again, you made it very, very clear to them that you're here to introduce yourself, and you're hoping that the outcome of this presentation is that we can start working together. um, if you're talking to an existing client, you can say, today I'm here to speak about project XYZ, because I need your go ahead or approvals or in 4 areas when it comes to project XYZ, right? That's what I need at the end of this presentation, your approval on these 4 areas. Or you can say, today I'm here to talk about project XYZ, and I want to in specific discuss 4 areas and get your go ahead and look for a way forward on each one of these 4 areas. That's what I'm here to discuss with you, right? So you can, at the start of every presentation, you can make the objective crystal clear to your audience, and your audience will kind of fall in love with you, right? So that's what this topic means. Like I keep saying, if your objective, if you as a presenter and communicator are crystal clear on the objective, which is what action do you want from the audience at the end, this is half the battle won for you to be an effective communicator. Because once you're clear on the objective, that means you have clarity of thought, right? You have clarity of thought, and clarity of thought precedes or comes before clarity of communication. Okay, I repeat, clarity of thought comes before clarity of communication. So if you don't have clarity of thought, you're never going to have clarity of communication. And that's where really nailing down your objective will help you. It'll help your email, spoken communication, and your presentation skills. Right now, I outline what you will be talking about. For more formal or detailed presentation, you can have an agenda slide, right? So what does this outline what you'll be talking about means? Very, very simply means that you're going to start by telling the audience, you could just say broadly, we're going to have 3 parts to this presentation. We're going to start with talking about what our past performance has been for the last 3 months. The second part we're going to talk about is what are the problems that we faced over the last 3 months. And the last part is we're going to keep that for Q&A between you and us, right? So we have 3 broad parts of the presentation. I'm going to start with the first one, right? So often when you're outlining, you can outline your presentation like that for the audience by saying, okay, we have 4 parts. This is the first, second, third, fourth. Very often, if your presentations are detailed, there could probably be 7 parts to it or 8 parts, right, to it. So you can have an agenda slide that you put up, right? And that agenda slide will really help your audience know exactly what you're talking about. But that's again something that you need to do in setting the context or the introduction. Right now, the third thing here, this is so interesting. Okay, now look at what we've spoken about. I want to do a quick recap on this, right? We said first, ensure that you introduce yourself well and you introduce your company well. Then we said second, what was the second thing? We said be clear on what your objective is or the final solution is that you're going to give, and also give your audience an agenda or an overall outline on what's going to happen. And then we get into the third part, which is the attention grabbers, right? Now, these two things just about everyone and anyone can do. The attention grabbers, as you get more and more comfortable, which is this slide, as you get more and more comfortable making presentations, you should try using these attention grabbers. If you've not reached a certain level of comfort, confidence, and courage while making your presentations, you may not like kind of dive deep into this attention grabber thing, right? It's only for somebody that has a little bit of competence over it, right? Studies show that if you can capture someone's interest straight away, there's a good chance they'll listen to you for the rest of their presentation, right? Um, by the way, one of the things, I'm just going to go off track and say something to you. So one of the things, if you realize, even when we've been doing these classes, as soon as I press the record button, Arunima often has a joke around this, right? Is I switch and I often am way more energetic than the conversation that I'm having with her even like 5 minutes back, right? That's because you studied this in class number 4 around tone of voice and how your tone of voice needs to be energetic, confident, passionate. It needs to have that, right? So when I'm talking about this, and if you're going to be attending this class for 1 hour, 1.5 hours, if I'm not energetic while doing it, you're going to sleep off, yeah, during this session. So that's one of the things that you need to keep in mind is when you're starting your presentation, ensure that you pump up and ramp up your own energy before you start the presentation, because often then that becomes the energy that you continue through the rest of the presentation, right? So do that in a very conscious, very careful way, and you'll see a positive impact through it. Okay, coming back to the use and attention grabber, if you can capture somebody's attention interest straight away, there's a good chance they'll listen to you for the rest of their presentation. Now, how can you do that, ladies and gentlemen? There are 4 or 5 ways that we're going to share with you. Number one, share a personal anecdote about how you got engaged in the topic that you're going to talk about, right? That's a good way in which you can grab their attention. Now for I'll give you examples of each one of them, right? This is an example. So if you're talking about this topic, you could say, now let me tell you, I'm giving you this example, okay, of how this can be done. So you can just say, one day I was on the phone with one of my customers of XYZ company, and it really struck me that although we as a company constantly talk about treating our customer as a king or queen, in action we never really ended up doing it, right? Because my customer had to wait on that call for 10 minutes, right? And that was so annoying for him. And while we put this up on our values that you're the king and the queen, it doesn't really resonate on the ground. And that's why I have come up with this project, which is for our phone banking team, which will cut the time of our customer service representatives getting in touch with the customer, where each one of them is going to get in touch with them within the first 60 minutes of them making a phone call, right? Because if we treat our customers as king, they need to get connected to our team within the first 60 seconds. And that's what this project that I'm going to talk to you about is, right? So now, how have you done it? You started it by really sharing a personal incident that happened to you, and how then you got associated with this topic because you felt so passionately about it. And that's how you can use a personal anecdote in anything that you're doing. If I'm talking about communication skills, right, I can always start by a personal anecdote around communication skills, as to which is true in my case, that when I was growing up, when I was a kid, when I was in school, I used to be a very poor communicator. And the truth of the matter is, my mother sent me for a presentation skills class, which was then called a public speaking speaking class, and that really turned it around for me. And therefore, I believe that it can turn it around for each one of us. So let's start with the communication. So again, a personal anecdote through which you can start your presentation, right? Arunima Kamat, you're on screen. Tell me, what's your question?
It's not a question, it's just
Yeah.
a statement. Although a lot of our concepts and things that we talk about here are related to business presentations, I just want to sort of digress. And if you watch a lot of TED Talks,
Yeah.
you see that they use this quite a lot, which is sharing a personal anecdote.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. Yeah.
so many TED Talks, I personally know that they begin with sharing a story either from their
Yeah.
childhood or, okay, this was an
Yeah.
incident that I
Yeah.
kind of encountered, and then
Yeah.
which is why it made me want to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is something used extremely, it's a very popular sort of
Yeah.
thing that a lot of TED
Yeah.
Talks
Yeah.
is used.
Correct. Now that you brought it up, I've seen that myself. I've seen that being used so many times in TED Talks, right?
Correct.
As to how a person really will give a personal anecdote on how we started research or how we got
Hmm.
involved in that topic. And I remember watching something on mental health as a TED talk, where the speaker, the presenter, right, captured the audience immediately by sharing her own his own experiences in as to how he struggled with mental health issues because he was misguided, went to the wrong
Correct.
doctor, and stuff like that happened, and therefore he got into researching on his book, and in turn he was giving a beautiful TED talk on that, right? So the minute you give a personal anecdote, it becomes a little bit like a story, right? And we are as human beings love a story, and we especially love a story that's personal, because then we can really relate to that person as well. In one of the previous classes, we spoke about the thing of, I think, vulnerability is what we spoke about, right? So the minute you share some personal anecdote, you share a little bit about yourself, you open up a little to the audience right at the start. They really appreciate that, right? And for me, like I said, I would often do this in my introduction itself, right, where I would, in a way, make fun of myself, take them through my journey, and really tell them how I got into the topic that I was talking about, right? And that really helped them great way. So you can share a personal anecdote on how you got engaged with the topic. Now, the other thing which is amazing is you can show a quirky, hard hitting fact or statistic on the issue that you're talking about, right? So 780 million people do not have access to clean water. So if you're talking about the subject of clean water, if you start your presentation by showing this kind of hard hitting fact, right? Or in the United States, work related stress causes an average of 120,000 deaths every year, right? Now, the way I would give an example of how you can use hard hitting facts while introducing your subject. This is how you could do it, right? Today, now I'm giving you an example of how somebody in a bank could do it. Um, Today, we're here to talk about a project that can make 5 lakh of our customers extremely happy every month, right? 5 lakh of our customers extremely happy every month. Today, I'm here to talk about increasing the ATM uptime that we have from 92% to 94%. Because even if we increase our ATM uptime by 2%, right, 5 lakh of our customers will be happy every month. That's what I'm here to talk about, right? So that's the way you can put a hard hitting fact forward. So if they think 5 lakh of our customers, wow, that's amazing. Now you could make it even more hard hitting, right? Today I'm here to talk about how 60 lakh customers a year of XYZ Bank can be happy every year. That's the thing that I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about how to increase our ATM uptime from 92% to 94%. That will make 60 lakh people happy, because the 2% downtime increase, right, or uptime increase that we have impacts so many people that go to our ATMs. They park their cars far away, right? You know, finding parking in India is such a problem. Then they walk all the way to the ATM, right, through summer, sometimes through rain, sometimes through puddle, sometimes they walk to the ATM, and when they go there and they see that it's out of service, it causes them tremendous distress. It's something that makes them dislike our brand, and that's exactly what we don't want. Not just that we lose money often on our ATM being downtime, it creates an extremely bad impression, and that's what I'm here to talk about. How do we increase this by 2%? And I need this much money from you all to do it, right? Again, so you're introducing the entire topic of ATM uptime through a brilliant hard, you've kind of, given a quirky hard hitting fact, and that's what you do, right? Now ask a provocative question. You can just switch this entire quirky fact into a provocative question, right? So you can be, don't you think it would be amazing for us to make 60 lakh customers a year happy? Right, so that's your quirky question that you can ask. Nobody's going to in the audience say no to that, right? About making 60 lakh customers happy. Of course we want 60 lakh customers to be happy. So when you again, I want to come back to something which is very important in this topic, ladies and gentlemen. If you're clear on the objective that you're trying to meet, everything that you do, even in your attention grabbing scene here, will meet that objective. Because what you want possibly as a part of that meeting of ATM uptime is you want to go ahead from the management, or you need a budget approval from the management. And if you're clear that that's what you want to do, even the way you start the presentation, what hard hitting fact you put in, what provocative question you put in, needs to in a way get married to the objective that you want to meet, right? That's the beauty of people that are crystal clear on their objective, ladies and gentlemen. So the same quirky hard hitting fact can be converted into a provocative question for the audience, right? Again, this could be another one that Arunima has put down. If you were a customer doing business with your own company, what would be your number one complaint? Right now, this is a question that really gets people to think, and then you can make a reveal of what that one thing is, and then kind of get into that topic, right? So that's another way of doing it. Now, this is what, again, this requires real advanced level skills, right? So I don't know whether you have them or not, but this requires real advanced level skills, where you in a way share a story from a movie, a show, or mythology, and in a way you connect the entire topic that you're talking about to that thing, right? um, and this, again, you need real advanced skills, and I don't really want to get that much into how you can do that. Yeah, but you can, again, if you're taking a movie, often take um, really really powerful movies, right? Powerful movies that most people would have watched, and you can start by giving an example from there, right? Mythology, I've seen so many advanced presentations, advanced presenters use mythology as a part of their opening, right? Of saying that, okay, you know what, from the Mahabharata, or from the Ramayana, that there are two camps, and this is one camp and that camp, and today we're in that same situation where we have us versus we have the competitor which is there. And this is not a fight because we want to beat them. This is a fight because we want to give the customer what's best for them, and that is the product or service from our company, right? So they start their kind of presentation using a little bit of mythological reference, as long as it's a popular one, as long as people know that inside out. But to do this, you need to kind of be at advanced skills, right? Now, the fifth one is introduce a hypothetical scenario. Ask the audience to imagine something, or think, what if, right? Here again, right? I can take that same bank example and tell you how you can do the hypothetical situation. You can say, imagine a situation. This is how you could start, by the way. Imagine a situation, and actually you don't even need to imagine a situation, because this is possibly something that has happened to you a long time back, where you needed money, you needed some cash desperately, and finally you saw an ATM of XYZ bank, and you're like, oh, thank God I saw the ATM. And then for the next 10-15 minutes, you are busy looking for parking, and then finally you find parking. And as it happens on that day, it's raining very very heavily, and you barely have an umbrella. So after parking the car close to 10 minutes away, you find an umbrella that's like barely there. It's like a broken umbrella that you have, but somehow you open that, and you kind of walk 10 minutes to that ATM that you've seen after parking at a distance, right? And then finally you've gotten to that ATM, and You see a sign right out there saying out of operation, right? I'm sure each one of you all can really think and feel and remember the frustration that you have felt on that day when something like this happened to you. In 1 year, this happens to 60 lakh of our customers. 60 lakh, right? And today I'm here to talk about how we need to increase our ATM uptime from 92% to 94%. That will help us make 60 lakh customers happy, right? So again, this is how you can use a hypothetical situation. You can kind of paint the scenario for them of one customer, right? And you can do this for just about everything. Okay, so I have to share this kind of story with you. We were working, I don't know whether I've shared this before, but I'll share it with you anyway. We were working with an oil and gas major, and we were working with the senior management of the oil and gas company. And this gentleman had made his presentation, and I was sitting through his presentation to advise him on what to do and how to do it as a part of a presentation skills workshop. And I realized through that presentation that he had done a fantastic job through the year, but the way he was presenting his data was so poor that nobody, even if they paid attention, nobody would know that he's done such a fantastic job with it, right? So of course I helped him kind of restructure his information and presentation, but then I also gave him a start, right? And the start was a hard hitting fact. So he said, today I'm here to talk about how me and my team, um, over the last year, have added to the company's bottom line by 3 crore rupees, right? And not just is it going to add to our bottom line in this year, from here on for the next 5 years, we're going to have this saving year on year. So we've basically, as a team, added 15 crores to the bottom line of this company over a period of 5 years. Today, I'm here to talk about how me and our maintenance team made certain changes to our oil and gas plant that has led to a 15 crore bottom line addition over the next 5 years. That's what I'm here to talk about, right? So right at the start, like literally your first line that you're saying to the management or the board of directors or whatever, their mouth would be open. They'll be like, man, this guy's added 3 crores in 1 year. We got to give this guy a promotion. And that's what we keep talking about, right? So many people do great work, but are so poor at presenting. And then they don't kind of make the required progress that they need to. And what you need to be is you need to be damn good at doing the work, and you also need to be damn good at presenting it. And if you have that combination, you're going to start doing exceedingly well for yourself and your company, right? So the hard hitting fact was 3 crores added to the bottom line in 1 year because of the work me and my team has done. And that's what I'm here to talk about. I want to tell you about what the maintenance team has done and what are the 4 things we did to really add to that bottom line, right? Very, very hard hitting. Now you can convert that same thing into a question, right? And you can say, you can have a hard hitting question that says, often the maintenance team is a team uh, where people don't pay enough attention to. We often pay attention to what the sales team is doing, what the marketing team is doing, but nobody pays enough attention to the maintenance team is doing. So I want to ask you all a question. How much money do you think the maintenance team has added to the bottom line in the last 1 year? Right, this is the way, the same fact can be a question that you ask, right? So that's the way you can really do it. So but introduction of a hypothetical scenario, I've given you examples of that now. And of course the last way in which you can do it is start with a strong quote which is connected to the subject that you're talking about. The only thing that we have to fear is fear itself. This is a message that I want all of you all to remember as we deal with what feels like trying times with the organization that I will talk to you about today, right? So often starting with a very, very powerful quote is another way in which you can grab attention, right? So these are 6 ways for you to grab attention right at the start. There are beautiful ways that we've suggested. Share a personal anecdote and how you got involved in the topic. Show a hard hitting fact or statistic. Ask a provocative question. Share a story from a movie, show, or mythology. Introduce a hypothetical scenario and ask the audience to imagine something or think what if, right? And what the think of what if really means, what if we could make 60 lakh of our customers happy every year, right? What if we could do that? So that's the way you could use what if things. Now, one of the things that I want you all to, we haven't added this exercise here. I actually just thought of it, and Arunima, ensure that you add it in our coaching session. I want you to, each one of y'all, to pause the video here and think of a presentation that you've made in the past and try using each one of these six attention grabbers for that one presentation that you used in the past, right? So try each one of them and see whether it works. If you're somebody that makes a lot of presentations, and if you have more than one presentation already with you, try doing this for ideally two, but if you don't have to, at least do it for one, and ensure that you show what you've done and discuss it with your coach during your live one-on-one coaching with him, right? So pause the video here, think of that presentation and do it right now, because if you don't do it right now, this is something which is fresh in your mind. So if you do it now, it's going to help you a lot more, but at least by the time you go for the coaching session, do it for sure then, right? Now we're done with the start and introduction. We discussed three things with you. We discussed introducing yourself and the company. We discussed setting the context by telling them the objective, the solution, and also showing them the outline or agenda. And then we said the third thing that you can possibly do at the start is say something that is attention grabbing. And we've given you six techniques to do that, right? After you've done that, you get to the body of the presentation. Right now, the body of the presentation is basically, now, let me just draw the McKinsey for you. We said to be clear on what the objective is or the solution. Then after that, ensure that you introduce yourself, give some context that we already kind of discussed there, right? And sometimes beyond this, you could also give some, the context could include giving some background about the subject that you're going to talk about as well, right? So that's something else that you can do. And then after you've given some background or context of what you're going to talk about in that subject, then we said divide your content into three parts, and then in turn ABC, and ABC, right? That's what you need to do. Now, the body of the presentation should meet the promises of the purpose and information made in the introduction, right? So you said, this is my objective. This needs to be in line with what you're saying, right? Clearly segment the topics, different topics you will be discussing in the presentations, work your way through them one at a time. So we've said, we've mentioned this in the McKinsey model, I'm repeating it here. So where you need to say, this is my point number one, and it needs to be very clear that you're talking about point number one to your audience. When you're done with point number one, there literally needs to be like, I wouldn't say Chinese wall, but there needs to be a like clear demarcation, and we're going to show you how to do those clear demarcation. There needs to be a clear demarcation where there you see, okay, now we're moving on to point number two. After you're done with point number two and whatever you say, now we're moving on to point number three. After you're done with your 3 points, and if before you go to your conclusion, you need to be, or your summary, you need to be clear that, okay, I'm moving on to my conclusion now, right? So clearly segment the different topics that you'll be discussing in your presentation. Organize your key points chronologically by priority or theme. So this is something that was discussed with you in McKinsey already. So you can have 1 2 3, you can prioritize them in terms of logic, say this comes first, this comes second, this comes third, or it could be in terms of importance, right? So this is the first most important point of why we should move our head office from Bombay to Pune. I'm going to put first. The second most important, I'm going to put second. The third most important, I'm going to put third, right? Address your main points one by one with supporting evidence, statistics, examples. So this is your ABC. You can get into great detail here. This is where you can show your charts, your whatever you need to back what you're saying needs to come here. And before moving on to the next point, provide a mini summary. So that's something that you can do, because just remember that the audience mind is very fickle and our memories are very short, right? So that's the reason why it's nice to do a quick summary of that point before you move on to the last one. And at the end, of course, you do a overall summary as well, right? Now, if you want to know more about this, you already have our class on the McKinsey pyramid model. go and have a look at that if you have forgotten what we had discussed there. Right now, what do you do at the conclusion or the end? Restate the topic and purpose of your presentation. For example, in this presentation, I wanted to compare, right? So whatever it is that you do, ensure that at the end you restate the objective of what you wanted from them. Like we discussed, summarize the main points covered in the presentation, including a summary slide, so you don't have to rely on your memory, right? So that's what you do. There was a very an old quote on public speaking that said, public every speech or presentation should have three parts to them, which said, uh, first, tell them what you're going to tell them. Second, tell them. And third, tell them what you just told them, right? So this is often said in jest, but this is exactly what a presentation needs to be. First, tell them what you're going to tell them, which is the objective, agenda, all those things. Then tell them, and after you're done with them, tell them what you've just told them, which is in a way the conclusion or the summary that you do, right? So this is age old advice on how to make presentations. So of course, make a summary, um, indicate what the audience should do next, or suggest a call to action, right? That means that if you need an approval from them or go ahead from them, like ensure that you're, yeah, like telling them right there and there, saying, okay sir, so do I have your go ahead on points 1, 2 and 3 that we discussed in the topic, and actually get a kind of sign off on each one of those things from whoever is sitting in front of you, right? Don't shy away from doing that sign off. Don't shy away from asking them directly that you need a sign off, because very often then they will say, oh, number one is okay, number three is okay, number two I have still some doubts. Then you can literally sit down in that presentation and ask the person, saying, what are your doubts, right? Or maybe he's done it during the presentation, but whatever it is, at the end, what you want, ensure that you ask the audience for it, right? We teach this to a lot of salespeople, and you would imagine that a lot of salespeople in the end would ask for the sale, right? But I've seen from personal experience and also data that salespeople will do everything, but in the end, they won't actually ask for the money and ask for the sale, right? Because in the way they don't want to face rejection, they feel awkward sometimes asking for the sale or the money, so they don't do that. And a lot of presenters do the same thing, right? They'll present the entire thing, but they won't actually ask for what they want at the end. And unless you meet your objective, your presentation is in a way not a good one, right? And of course, thank the audience and invite questions, right? We've already done a class for you of how to handle Q&A. I hope you signed up for that class. It's an amazing class that we did on how to handle tough audiences and Q&A, where we've gotten into great detail of what to do while presenting. But that's a good sign always, right? To ask questions at the end. So that's the way you go about concluding. Now, what are the typical in your business scenario, what are the types of presentations that you will end up doing, right? So one is, of course, presentations where you're going to be providing some information. Okay, so that's a presentation that you're going to be doing to somebody. Often it's teaching a skill, right? And it may not be a skill, it could be teaching about a kind of skill or a software, or a new program, but basically teaching or educating people on something or the other that's happening within your organization or outside. It could be educating them on something, right? The third is reporting progress. So these are typically your review meetings, right? A bulk of our PPTs or presentations are made for review meetings. But often what I've seen in companies is that, especially the slightly larger, more evolved ones where a lot of presentations are made, often these reporting progress or review presentations have their own standard kind of format of how the PPT needs to be made. So if they have 5 people making it, all 5 of them will have a standard way in which they're supposed to make that PPT, right? So, but this is often the other thing that we make presentations around. So you're providing some information to somebody, it could be educating or teaching a skill, software, or something within the organization. It could be reporting some progress. Yeah, often we make presentations where we need to selling a product or a service, or sometimes it is selling an idea or a project internally, right? So this is not just for the external kind of customer that you're talking about, but you may have to get a approval or a go ahead on something from the top management, right? So you're selling a product, service, idea, project internally or externally to people, right? And a lot of our presentations, the more senior you become, they're often in this range of selling a product, a service, an idea, a project, or getting an approval, getting a go ahead from people, right? And then the last one is solving a problem, or giving a problem and a solution, right? So often in organization, while you're doing something, while doing projects, you have, or not just while doing projects, at any point of time there could be certain problems that come up, and then you really as a presenter need to present what the problems are and what the possible solutions are, right? So that's these are the typical presentations that are made in a corporate setup. Now I'm going to show you a few examples and samples of how you can use the McKinsey model and really structure your presentations in a nice way. Right now, um, guys, this is how we use the McKinsey model all the time while teaching you skills. And if you've seen, most of these presentations that we do often follow this kind of a structured manner, right? So now you can pause this and you can have a look at how we've done it, but let me go about explaining it to you largely. Okay, now this is where we're teaching people in through a live online class on organizing skills. So we start the first slide by just asking and answering the simple question of what does being organized, what does it mean to be organized, right? So we talk about the what here of the matter, right? What does it mean to be organized? So we talk about this. Then the next thing we move on to, and here, if you've seen, we've shared again 3 to 4 points of what does it mean to be organized. Then after we're done with that, we answer the next question as to why is it important to be organized. And here again, as you see, there are 3 points that we've shared here on why is it, why do you need to be organized. Then the next thing that we've done is we've tried to start with some kind of a quote, right? Some kind of an important message here. Being organized is all about self-discipline, right? That's kind of the main thought or quote that we have on this subject. So we shared that right off the top. And then we got into saying, how can we become better at organizing, right? Now we're answering that. And then we have the 3 T's of organizing, which is organize your time, organize your tasks, and organize your things. So Arunima has put this content together in quite an elegant way for people to remember it. Organize your time, organize your tasks, and organize your things, right? These are the 3 things that you need to do to organize yourself. And then we've taken the first point, and then that first point goes here, right? So we have a slide breaker, which we'll tell you more about. You have a slide breaker where you say, okay, number one, organizing your thought. And then this topic of organizing your thought, we have again divided into kind of 3 points here of saying time auditing, time boxing, and maintaining a calendar. And under each one of them, we've given you 3 points each, right? And in this case, there are 5 points. And we move on to the next thing, and we followed the same kind of format of getting this information across to you. And very often we have this is simple kind of indicative data here, but very often each one of these things are interspersed with some activities, exercises, role plays that can be done depending on the subject that we're doing. But first we organize our thoughts this way, and then we put some activities in this to basically drive the learnings that need to come out from these 3 things, right? So here you see one kind of beautiful way in which you can organize your thoughts if you're teaching a skill to somebody, right? You get into the what is that subject about, why is it important, a quote or no quote, and then how do you go about doing that, right? Okay, now using the McKinsey pyramid model to structure different types of presentation, let's look at how you could do a progress report. Begin with highlighting the purpose of your presentation, which is you can just say, I'm here to give, share my progress with you. Very often, when you're sharing progress reports, in my experience, you're sharing a progress report today. You're sharing a progress report, and you're in a way you want the opinions, suggestions, advice of a senior manager that's sitting in that, and often you want them to also ask whatever questions they may have on that subject, right? So if that's what you want, make that clear right at the start, of the presentation, where you can say, today I'm here to talk about the progress that we've made on this project in the last 3 months. And on each one of the main progress areas, I want to have your suggestions, your advice, and possible questions that you may have on it, right? So you've made your objective very clear right at the start as to what you want from your audience there. And then, of course, you can divide it into three parts like this, right? You can say, my presentation has three broad parts to it. Number one, we're going to talk about what we've achieved so far in the last 3 months on this project. Then we're going to talk about what are the challenges that we faced, the main ones that we faced, and what is the way ahead on this project. Right now, you can divide it like that, or you can divide it in any way that you want to. Okay, so just 1 minute. Let me show you, if I were to make a PPT on this, how would I do it? Okay, just a minute. Let me add a couple of slides and show you. Okay, so again, if you're making a presentation on a project report, you could say the okay. Now let me just show you a few slides. Now, depending on the audience, you could, of course, you could have an, like a your first slide, which is your where you have the topic. Sorry, where you have the topic of the presentation that you're making progress, and you can write progress report on XYZ project. Now, you can always start again. I don't know how well you know your audiences. You may not have to introduce yourself depending on who you're speaking to. So that really depends on that. But let's assume that you know this audience well. You don't need to introduce it. The context background that you can give here is about this project itself, right? So you can give whatever the key points are of the project to them, and then you can kind of divide your information into saying that, okay, then we have three parts of this presentation: progress so far, then we have number two, we have the challenges that we faced, okay, and number three, you have the way ahead. So these are the three main parts of my presentation. I want to start my presentation with the progress so far, right? Now, then you give the key kind of points of the progress that you've made so far. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This could come now in any format, right? You could show the progress in some diagrammatic form. Often people do that, where they have some diagrammatic form in which they show the progress that they've made, whatever it is that you want to, right? And highlight what the main points are there. So this is your number one. Then you go to your number two, which is your, the challenges faced by the company, by XYZ, and you say, okay, the main challenges that we faced is number one, this is the challenge that we face. This is something that we've done about this challenge, and I also want your suggestions to what we can do. Number two, this is the challenge that we faced, and this is, I want yours. Number three, this is, so again, in a simple way, and then you can go into details there, get their suggestions on it, and then you need to say way ahead and do it, right? So this is, again, if you have a kind of progress report, this is the way you can go about structuring it, basically. Okay. Okay, now, if you're going to go and if you're going to be selling a product or a service or an idea to somebody, begin with introducing what the product or service is, explain its features to the audience, discuss why the product service is necessary to that particular audience, then highlight the three benefits of the product with supporting evidence, data, examples, testimonials, include with a summary, and ask the audience if they like to go ahead with the product. Right now, I'll give you another example. Um, if we are making as work better training, if we are making a corporate presentation to somebody, this is how we possibly would do it, right? So this becomes your work better introduction, right? Then we start by giving a little bit about our background, right? So we give all our key facts about our background, where we'll say, okay, this is when we established ourselves, we've been around for 12 years, this is what we've done so far. We often, in our background, we give a couple of more details, right? We'll share something about our clients, we'll share something about our media presence, right? We make a quick presentation on little telling them about work better. Then the next slide that we have is often if you're making a presentation for the first time to the client, then we'll have a slide that says, why should you work with us, right? We say, why should you work with us? Simple. And then we say the number one reason that why you should work with us is, we'd say the RFL approach, right? We have something which is called the RFL approach for our corporates, which is result focused learning approach. This is the first reason why you should work with us. And then we kind of give details about what that result focused approach is. Then we say the second reason why you should work with us is vast experience in banking training, right? So this is the second reason why you should work with us. And then we can go about telling you all our banking clients that are there, what are the projects that we've done for banking, so on and so forth, right? So again, it becomes a very simple way in which you do this content. You first give some background, give some context about what you're talking about, right? So in this case, the because you're making a pitch for the first time, that context could be, not just one slide, but it would go more into details. And then you get straight to the point by saying, okay, now why should you work with us, right? So these are the reasons why you should work with us versus working with any company, and then explain each one of them, right? So that's the way you can make this content for that matter. Again, like I keep mentioning, once you're clear on what your objective is, once you know what you want to achieve at the end, you need to structure it well. You need to be very direct with the people that you're speaking to, right? A lot of us, and especially Indian people, are not very well known to be direct with other stakeholders. We'll beat around the bush. But the best way to get your work done to meet your objectives is to be very direct, forthright with people and tell them, this is why I'm here. This is what I want from you. And people will appreciate that a lot more, because that is a sign of a good communicator. And when you show courage to speak directly with people, it also shows that you have leadership capabilities, right? That you have the courage and confidence to do that. So that again works very well. Okay. Now, this is your reflection zone around this. This, I think, was some really nice content built by Arunima on this subject, right? It's quite a tricky thing to build content around, because you guys are going to make different kinds of presentations to different audiences with different objectives, right? So there can never be one rule that can guide each one of them. But I think the McKinsey pyramid model works well. The way we've divided it will work very, very well for you. So pause the lecture here and think of the 3 to 5 things that you will start doing differently while structuring your presentation and while putting your content together. Ensure that your takeaways are specific and implementable. And of course, you know the routine by now. You need to take these 3 to 5 points and discuss them with your coach, and give them your point of view, and kind of take his point of view on that. I think one of the exercises that Arunima will probably give you is for you to take one of your existing presentations also and restructure it using the McKinsey pyramid model and using what you've learned here. So that's something that you'd have to do, and then go about presenting it and to your coach. Arunima, am I right about that?
Yes, it's
Okay.
mentioned in the mini project.
It's mentioned in the mini project already. Okay. So pause here and take your takeaways. Don't go on until you've written all your learnings from the section so far, because if you lose your learnings, you lose money that you paid for this session, right? Now, the second part of this class is around designing your slides. That's what we're here to talk about. Again, something which is very, very interesting. Now, introduction to slide design. This is, we've taken a lot of kind of content from this book, which is called Slideology. It's not possible to take everything from this because it doesn't really cater to a business context, but this is a kind of good book to read if you're interested in this subject. You won't be able to pick up everything from it, but it's a good book to read. Right now, the audience will either read your slides or listen to them. So ask yourself, is it important that they listen, or more effective if they read? Okay, now, very interesting. Why do we use slides to present our thoughts to an audience? And you must realize that using slides while doing public speaking is a relatively new phenomena. People have been public speaking for hundreds of years, even when we were tribal people, even when we were hunters, farmers, at that point of time, a lot of public speaking would happen. But public speaking with slides is what presentation skills is about in a way, right? And that's a fairly recent phenomena. And what are those slides supposed to do? They're supposed to do two things primarily. Number one, it is supposed to help the speaker organize and structure his thoughts well before he comes to present to an audience. So the minute you need to put something in a presentation, you need to put your thoughts across, right? And when you're putting and you're trying to structure your thoughts across, you also happen to give that subject some deep thought when you have to make a presentation. And that's why your bosses, super bosses, more often than not, when they ask you to make a presentation on this subject, and we often get irritated saying that, why is he asking me to make a presentation on it? Because through the process of making a presentation on something, you often end up studying it, understanding that subject better, structuring your thought better. You have the ability to explain it better after that. That's the reason why they ask you to make a presentation on it, right? So coming back, the purpose of kind of slides is, like I said, number one, it's for the speaker, where before coming to make that presentation, he ends up studying the subject, understanding the subject, and kind of putting his thoughts down, which gives him a deeper understanding. It also helps the speaker when he's making the presentation, because he doesn't need to remember or by heart everything. He has it on a slide and he can look at that slide and kind of explain it to the audience, right? So that's the way having a slide helps the speaker, right, to prepare, and also it gives him a cue on what to talk about. Now, how does a slide and what you put on a slide help the audience, right? It again helps the audience in understanding the subject better, because they're not just listening to you, they also have something to look at. And as we've seen in the past, and we've discussed, one of the ways in which to bring about clarity and simplicity to your communication is often showing visuals, or often showing diagrams to people. And in a lot of cases, people as an audience, they absorb more. There are certain audiences that absorb more when they listen to stuff, and there are certain audiences that absorb more when they actually read something, right? So when you have a slide and you have some information on them, lots of audiences will just read that and they'll grasp the main point of what you're trying to say and then also listen to you, right? um, when it comes to that. So the slides in a presentation help both the presenter and they help the audience as well, as long as those slides are well done. Otherwise, that same slide can become a villain for both the speaker and the audience. And it becomes a villain largely when you don't end up structuring your thought well. And number two, when you end up cluttering your slide a lot, and not putting the information across in the right way, right? Now, again, you need to remember the reason why you can't have too much of information on one slide is simple, and the reason is that your audience cannot listen and read at the same time. They can either listen or read to you, which brings me to another point. If you ever are compelled to have lots of data on your slide, ensure that you ensure that you pause what you're saying for 30 seconds and tell the audience, listen, I'm giving you 30 seconds. First, absorb the information which is on the slide, and then I will give you my insight on this, right? So let there be 30 seconds of silence while you're presenting. Let the audience absorb the slide totally of what you're trying to say. If it's 15 seconds, give them that. Because the minute you keep quiet and you ask the audience to look at it, your audience will totally pay attention to the slide and absorb that information, and then you can give your point of view, right? Don't just keep talking if you have a lot of data on your slide. That's a wrong thing to do. And the same thing holds true when you're making virtual presentations, right? When you're making a virtual presentation, if you have lots of data on it, you can just start by saying that this slide is on this subject, and I want you all to take 10 seconds, 15 seconds in silence to just go through this entire slide, and then I'll start speaking on it, right? So then the audience will kind of read all the data, look at it, and then you can kind of go through it, right? So that's a technique, because your audience can't listen and read at the same time. Good presentations primarily focus on the presenter. The slides reinforce the content visually rather than create distractions, allowing the audience to comfortably focus on sport. Like I said, your slides can be a villain to you if you don't use it well. It can confuse both you and your audience, and slides should serve as visual aids to reinforce the presenter's message, right? That's what you want to do through them. Now, on the topic of designing your slides, we've broken this section into two parts, which is number one, general design tips on what you need to do with your slides, and number two, displaying information and data effectively. How do you go about doing that? Okay, now what are some of the general design tips? So the first design tip is this, a beautiful one. Have a consistent look and feel. Choose element styles and then stick with them for the entire presentation. Each slide should feel like it's part of the same story, right? So this is, if you've seen most of our presentations, um, we make a lot of presentations, right? So we need to, in a way, find a technique to keep them very simple, but you'll find so much of commonality in all our presentation, and that's done by design, because the minute you look at this, you need to know this is a work better presentation. So you will see, just look at this slide here, right? You will see that most of our slides are designed in the same way. You have an image here, right, to the right hand side, and you have points here. That's what you have. If you have a slide breaker, like we just saw a slide breaker, you have an image like this, and often you have the text that is put in a bright green color, right? So this is the way you will find the slide breaker. And on each one of our slides, you will find this line, this green line toward the bottom, that adds a little bit of color to it. And you'll find the same font being used everywhere in our presentations, right? So any work better presentations for CCP, you will find the same font, and there's a consistent look and feel, so that you know that this is something that belongs to this is a work better creation, belongs to work better. It's exactly like if you go to a Starbucks cafe, each and every Starbucks cafe that you go to will have a consistent look and feel. If you go to a cafe coffee day cafe, each one of them will have a consistent look and feel. And that's the same thing that you need to do with your presentations. Use the same typography, colors, imagery on your slide. And by the way, this thing that we have done here is one of, if you don't want to use a lot of your creativity and you don't want to waste time doing this is one of the best ways to make a lot of presentations, which is stick to this style of having, some kind of a color element here, which is, you can make that connected to your brand colors. So if you look at our brand color, if you look at our logo, it's this bright green color. So we use that logo color here. So you can use that here. And often when you're making a presentation, just put an image here, which is easy to find, and then your text here, right? So that's what you can do um, while you're doing it. Now, even if you look at this second kind of example, this is a template that you have, where again, you'll find these elements in this templates, which are where all the elements are consistent. And this is very, very important if you're going to make business presentations that look professional, right? Yeah, use a template, but ensure that you have a consistent look and feel for all your presentations. Right now, examples, again, these are more examples of a consistent design. If you see this presentation, look at each and every slide, right? You're seeing the same elements of kind of blue here and the same design sensibility here. Here again, you're seeing these three colors, one, two, three colors that they've used. And if you see, they've used these one, two, three colors everywhere. They've used this one, two, three here. They've used these one, two, three, and they have another color here, but these same three colors are coming everywhere. So there's a certain kind of uniformity or consistency in what's happening, and they'll use the same font everywhere, the same kind of these design elements everywhere, right? So they're doing that through and through everywhere. Okay, so this is an example of that. Now, background. Oh, this is where so many people make mistakes, right? The slide background is the surface setting you will place your elements on, which is your images, text, and charts. Keep the background as simple and clean as possible. It shouldn't look crowded and distracted, as shown in this image. This is an actual background that a company's use that we've seen, right? So basically what happens is, this is ineffectual because you're using so much of the slide. Look at how much of the slide that you've used in this background itself. So the area that you have to actually put down your stuff is very, very limited. So the best thing to do more often than not is not to have a background at all. So we don't have a background here. The only thing that we've done here is we've used this small line that adds a little bit of color to it, but there's no background. It's just a white slide where we put our information on. And often you can do the same thing, right? So keep the background simple and clear. If you have a background, the best thing is not to have a background at all. Treat the background as real estate. The more you put in your background, the less space you're left with to put your actual content. The background shouldn't draw too much attention or focus. It shouldn't compete with your content, right? So ideal case, don't put a background at all. Like a lot of companies have stuff like this, it looks awful. When people often see some white space, they want to fill up that white space by putting something or the other, which is an absolutely bad idea, because you don't want your content to, you don't want your background to compete with your content in any way, right? So be careful of that. Now, these are a few examples of very, very poor backgrounds. We've seen so many companies do something like this. Look at this image, right? Where you have a background which you put like this, and on top of that background you put the text like this, so this text is barely visible, right? Or again, here is the same mistake that somebody's made, right? You have a kind of background that is taking so much of the space, and you have very, very little space to put your stuff. But I've seen more often than not people making this kind of a mistake, right? Where they put this some image behind and then they put something on it. It's not clear to the audience, and of course you don't want to do put such distracting backgrounds where you can barely read what is on it, right? Yeah, so don't make any of these mistakes while using your slides. Now, the third tip here is choose colors carefully. Determine your background color before deciding on the color palette. The human eye requires contrast for visibility, right? Pure black or white backgrounds are the best options as they offer the greatest contrast. Now, what does contrast mean? Now, look at this thing, right? This is a classic case of a contrast that is done where you have a red background and you have a kind of, white on it, right? So the minute you have this white on it, it totally stands out. Here they've used just too many colors, and that is what like makes it a problem, right? If they just had this gray background and they had the black text on it, that would have been good enough. Or as a matter of fact, if they just kept it white and they had this text on it, that would have been a much better way to do it, right? So often keep ideally keep the combination two, but don't go more than kind of three, right? Don't use more than three text colors, but ideally it should just be kind of two that you do. Make sure the colors you choose contrast with the background, dark text on a light background or light text on a back. This is something that we just discussed. Okay, and if possible, use your company brand or colors while doing it, right? So use colors very, very carefully. You would have seen that we do it, right? Now look at the generally the way we do our slides. Our background is white and we put our text in black, which is very, very simple. If we have a black, if you look at our slide breakers, they're often a dark color. On that, we'll often put a bright green or a white, right? So again, there's contrast there for you. I'm going to quickly just go and show you that our slide breakers, right? So look at our slide breaker here. So on this slide breaker, you have a very dark background that you can barely see this image, right? Which is there. And this, we have a kind of white large text on it, which becomes very easy for you to see, and it's very clear that it's a slide breaker for you, right? So see another example, you designing your slides, again a very dark background is what we've used. Then here we've used kind of not more than two colors. Like we said, they've said three, but I would say two. So you have this one color, and if you have this your second color, right, while doing it. And this is again an example of a great slide. Now, by the way, somebody could say that, oh, but I don't like the way that slide looks, right? So, see, there's a certain minimum threshold for what good design is, and this presentation meets that minimum threshold of good. If somebody says, no, but I like this slide a lot, right? And no, beauty is subjective. No, beauty is not that subjective. You may like this slide, but it's not good for the audience, because the audience while picking it up can't see anything. So you can't just work on the principle of saying, but I don't like it, right? When you're presenting something to somebody, it should be about the audience. Like we said, our golden rules of communication when we started the first class, we said communication is all about the other person, right? So you need to make the structure is all for the other person, the simplicity is all for the other person, the way you use your colors is so that the it's easy for the other people to absorb what you're trying to say. It's not about just what you like, right? Now, the number of words in a slide, there is no official rule for word count. Ultimately, you need enough words to effectively deliver your message. Cover your message in its entirety, but aim for the lowest word count possible, right? So, this is what you should kind of try to do. And sorry, okay, this is what you should try to do. Keep text that will help you recollect the message so you can explain it to the audience in detail, right? That's what you need to try to do. Keep the text that will help you recollect the message. If you use wordy slides, the audience will read the slide more quickly than you can explain it. And if you can't avoid using wordy slides, you can progressively reveal the slides as needed. What does progressively mean? You can show just this point, then click, then show this one, then click, then show this one, then click, then show this one, right? So that's what it means. If you have too much of text, show it one by one. So your audience is paying attention to the first point. Then when you go to the next one, they're just paying attention to that, so on and so forth, right? So they're doing it in that way. Now, so your attempt in all writing, whether it's email or presentations, should be to get your message across in as few words as possible, right? That's a principle of making your communication concise, as we remember from our precision model of communication, right? So in business communication, we need to make our messages concise, which means try to knock off every word that you can knock off from the text. Try to get your message across in as few words as possible. That's what you need to do. Okay. Now, I'll give you an example of this thing. Okay, so if you're making a presentation and if you're saying, if I'm from ICICI Bank, right, and if I say, if I have kind of text that I put on my slide, which I say ICICI Bank has 4,000 branches all across India. Right now, this is the text that I've written here. ICICI Bank has got 4,000 branches all across. I don't need to write that entire thing if the person in front of me knows that I'm from ICICI Bank, right? So I can just put a bullet and I can write 4,000 bank branches in 90 cities in India. Okay, 10,000 ATMs in 200 cities, right? So I don't need to write the whole sentence there. I don't need to write ICICI Bank has. I don't need to write. I can knock all of that out because it's obvious that you're talking about ICICI Bank, and then you can just put it across like this, right? So here you're trying to minimize as many words as possible before you're putting it out and not writing full sentences. That's what this you're supposed to do in terms of the number of words that you put on the slide, right? We often, if you've seen our presentations that we use here, we often use slightly more words than are required, and the our objective is very simple. As a tutorial or something that we're teaching you, you should be able to pause this right now and kind of do a revision by just reading all the points here. Or you should be able to go back to any slide, just pause it there and just quickly read what is written there for you to revise it. And if we if we don't put the entire sentence across, you may not kind of follow the message there, right? So that's the reason why we make it slightly more wordy than what we would have for a typical presentation, right? That's point of view. But what you need to do is, of course, just try to minimize the amount of words that are there. Right now, font type, some people find commonly used fonts boring and they look for something exciting and fun. This leads to the use of Comic Sans or some other equally bad fonts, right? They want to make it exciting in some way. Now, don't do that for your business presentation. Stick to formal professional fonts as much as possible. Use one font throughout your presentation, right? If you must use multiple fonts, don't combine more than two fonts in one presentation. Use one font for your headline and subheadings and the other for the text. Both fonts should complement each other. Use color or italics to create emphasis instead of introducing a new font, right? That's what you're supposed to do. If you want to, don't use too many fonts. As far as possible, use one, maximum two. If you're using two, one should be for the heading, and for the body it should be one font. Use professional fonts. We've already given you details of what those professional fonts can be. Arunima, as a part of the learning resources, you may also want to mention what some of those professional fonts are for them, right? So when they read them, just
Yes.
for their for their own recollection, we've mentioned this in an earlier class, but you may want to put it down here as well while you're doing it, right? Okay, so that's what you do as the font type. Now, your alignment, use justified text or left alignment. Justified text gives a hard edge which increases readability, right? So what it means is when you're putting your text across, ensure that you make it left aligned like this, right? So that it becomes much easier for a person to read when it's left aligned, or make it centrally aligned, because again you have not centrally aligned, make it aligned like this, right? Which is called justified text is what you can do. So either make it left aligned or justified text for the readability. Center alignment should be your last resort. When you have text which is aligned, centrally aligned, it becomes way more tougher for people to read that. So stick to these two as far as the general principle of putting your slides down. Now, using bullets is something which is important. Use bullets for each key point you want to convey on the slide. If you want to add details under the bullets, use the sub bullets, right? So this is how you can do it, and this is how you can use the sub bullets. As far as possible, if you've seen at least most of our presentation, if we're putting these points across, we try as far as possible not to exceed 5 or 6 points per slide, right? That's our limit. We love it when we only have 3 or 4 points, but we don't try to exceed 5 or 6 of this. If we have some sub points to it, we try not to exceed, at least the main points, we try not to exceed 2 or 3 main points with 2 or 3 under them, right? That's what we try to do as a rule, so that our presentations don't look too cluttered or too text heavy, right? So often, like we say, you should do this, and this is much easier for this audience to read when you put stuff in bullet points rather than putting big paragraphs like this, right? So we at Work Better are huge lovers of structuring and bulleting your points. It makes it easy for everyone, but try not to have more than 5 or 6 such points on one slide. You can, if you have more than 5 or 6, you can continue them on the next slide. And if you have bullet points, have 2 or 3 main points and 2 and 3 sub points, right? Don't try to exceed that, then it becomes too cluttered. Okay, now images, choose images that support and elevate the message. Your images should be relatable, relevant, and inspirational, right? Select high res images. Now this is a really high res image, that's why Arunima has put it in. Do not use pixelated or blurry images. That makes your presentation look very bad. Arunima, would you like to come in and quickly tell us where you often find these images which you use? What do you type to find those images?
So there are some websites available which I've also mentioned in the learning resources,
Correct.
such as Images Bazaar is one.
Yeah.
There is one more, I can't recollect the name, but these
Yeah.
are places where you usually get high res images
Correct.
and high definition images. So these are great places. Sometimes a lot of these websites are Western, they have Caucasian sort of
Yeah.
characters.
Yeah.
So in that case, Google usually is the safest, easiest, quickest way to look for images.
Correct.
What helps is the kind of search words that you put in. So
So what are the
depending,
search words that you put in typically if you want to find an image?
again, it depends on what is the objective of that slide for me. So if it's a
Correct.
slide that we're talking about as the presentation skills,
Yeah.
and I then want to look out for a business person giving a presentation, so I'll put it in as many words. If
Yeah.
I want to show two people talking, so two
No,
business
I'm sorry.
people,
Wait,
or a
wait, 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 wait. So you would put on Google, you would put saying a business presentation, high res image, vertical. Is that the way you'd go about putting it?
No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
What I would do is, and in one of the articles that I've shared, we've
Yes.
highlighted this. There are certain settings in Google that you
Yeah.
can click on, which will give you
Yes.
high res images.
Correct.
So I usually run a generic search, but in my advanced settings, I can just change the settings to
High
a
res.
certain, yeah, there's a certain sort of range,
Yes.
and that is what you can select. Also, if you want to manually look for, I think anything above, I think 1000,
Correct. That's
I'm
not
not
required.
sure of
That's not
the
required. As long as
limits,
you type, yeah,
but
that's
yeah,
not required. Yeah, if you just type
yeah,
high res, I think that's more than enough, right? Now, what does
correct.
relatable, relevant, and inspirational mean? That if you're doing a presentation skills topic, ensure that the image there is connected to presentation skills. If it's something which is you're talking about slides, then ensure that your image there is connected to slides, so on and so forth, right? Whatever you're talking about on that slide, ensure that the image is connected to that. That's simple. Use high res, because if you use pixelated or blurry images, that's going to look very bad. Ensure that your images don't have visible watermarks. Again, that's a very unprofessional way of putting it. Avoid overuse of visuals. Choose one high quality image that sums up the theme of your slide, right? So instead of putting multiple images here, try to find one big image that really does the job for you, right? That has more power than just putting too many images. Okay. Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. And don't stretch an image to fit the slide, right? So be careful. If you have to stretch it, please stretch it from the corners. That's the way you're supposed to stretch your images when you're doing it, right? Now, of course, this is something that we discussed earlier, but don't clutter your slides too much. Now, this is kind of classic examples of you cluttering your slides, where you're putting way too many things on this slide. Right now, look at this slide. This has a kind of background which is there. It has some website that you mentioned here for no reason. Often people put God knows just how many things, their logos, they put two graphs or one thing. This is a terrible way of doing it. Right now, look at this slide. This slide is clutter free. It doesn't have too many things on it. Each one of these slides is a much better way of doing it, right? So don't add too many elements on one slide. That leads to clutter. Leave enough white space between different elements. A slide value is not determined by the amount of information it contains, but by how clearly it communicates the message. Beautifully put. Okay, this is the most important thing. How clearly does it communicate the message of the slide? And very often when you're making a presentation, um, now, for example, a lot of people have a concern that, oh, will my slides be too many, right? It's once you become clear on what your objective is, very often you will cut down on the amount of information that you will give, because in my experience, most of that information will be irrelevant for you to meet your objective. Now, look at this case here. This person, I think, is introduced these two charts on one slide, because in his head he's probably saving the amount of slides, but that doesn't help. He could have had this as one slide and this as another, because the more important thing is not to get across all your information on one slide. The more important thing is how clearly it communicates the message, and having this on one side does not clearly communicate the message, right? And it's okay to have clear space. Clutter is a design failure, right? So this is something that you need to keep in mind. Okay. Now, this is something that we discussed earlier, but just specific to this, if you want to draw your audience's attention to something on the slide, you need to make it stand out. And the way you can make it stand out is by varying the size, weight, and color of the element, right? So don't use too many fonts, but if you want to, right, highlight something, you can bold it as it's done here, or you can bold it and change the color of it as well, right? So if you've seen here, they've bolded it and changed the color. Here they've done the same thing. They've made it all caps, bolded it, and changed the color for this to really stand out. So that's the way you make stuff stand out in a presentation context, right? Now, this is your reflection zone. Please quickly pause the video here and think of the 3 to 5 things that you've learned up to this point in the presentation, that of course you need to share with your coach on what you're going to start doing after this session. Right now, the next part is about displaying information and data effectively. Right, this is the last part of this is session. Very important stuff here. Now, how to present your information and data effectively? There are 3 things that you need to do. You need to keep it simple and clear. You need to get to the point of what you're saying, and you need to pick the right tools for the job, right? So this is the 3 things. Let's go to the first one. Keep it simple and clear. That's the main thing of getting your data across. Okay, so give me a minute. When it comes to displaying information and data in your presentation, adhere to one principle above all, which is clarity. Okay, data can often confuse the audience, so ensure it is represented in a simple and clear manner where the audience can absorb it easily. Avoid all unnecessary distractions, and the message will come through much clearer. Don't manipulate or hide your data. Right now, look at this data box here. So if you look at this data representation, it's very, very confusing and unclear. So you don't want to do something like this, and look at as compared to doing something like this, right? So this is just a simple kind of way of putting the data across, but this will actually help your audience understand it. So at all points of time when you're putting your data across, try to keep it as simple and clear as possible, and don't do stuff like this, right? And every slide, look at it and ask yourself, where can my audience be confused or misinterpret or not be clear on what I'm presenting? And if you have something like this, that's definitely the case, right? Now, keep it simple and clear. The second thing that you need to do, connected to keeping it simple and clear, the first thing is importance of slide breakers. Now, I am a big fan of slide breakers. I don't think any presentation should not have a slide breaker. If you see all our presentations, they have it, because a slide breaker is exactly in a way what you do in a book, right? When you're reading a book and you're going from one section or one chapter to the other, there is a breaker, right? You know that you finished one chapter and you're going to another chapter, and that really helps the audience. It helps the reader. If somebody is reading a magazine, it's very clear that one story is over and the next story in that magazine is starting. Again, that's very clear, but very often people don't do the same thing in their presentations, right? So please ensure that you have slide breakers wherever you're going from one section to the other, or you're presenting different information. The audience can get lost during long presentations, especially if you have lots of slides. To help reorient your audience, use slide breakers. Use slide breakers. Slide breakers are used to show a transition from one section to another to denote the start and end of major sections. Slide breakers should stand out from the rest of your slides while following the same theme. For example, if your slides are mostly white, your slide breaker should have a dark background. This is exactly what we do in our presentations. All our slides are white. Okay, only our slide breakers are black, right? So that's exactly what you can do. And this example is an example where a slide breaker can also be used to show the agenda again, while highlighting the relevant section, serving as a progress bar for the audience, right? So this is if you have four things that you're discussing in your presentation. Now look at this. If you're at this mark, this is highlighted. So this same slide is a slide breaker that you use everywhere. So if you're on section 3, before section 3, you come to this and this is highlighted. So it's clear to the audience. Then when you go to section 4, this will be highlighted, right? But the slide breaker will be the same, right? So this is another kind of way in which you can use the slide breaker to tell the audience that you're moving from one to the other, and also remind them of the entire thing that you've kind of been through so far. Right now, this is extremely important, guys, so please pay attention. The audience can't examine your data closely, so here the point is, get to the point, right? The audience can't examine your data closely, so you need to represent the clear takeaway from the slide, right? The data slides are not really about the data, they are about the meaning of the data. Clearly articulate the conclusions you want your audience to draw from your data. Ask yourself, what is it that you want the audience to get from that data? What's the message that you want to give? Right? Once you are certain about the meaning of your data, you will find it much easier to build the slide. Your conclusions will determine the type of graph you choose and how you want to lay emphasis on it. Right? Now, look at this. These are beautiful examples that we've shared. Um, so if you have a slide like this, the first impression of this chart is the sales growth and recovery, right? But in reality, the purpose of the chart was for HR to draw attention to the March timeframe for whatever reason, right? So if you just show this and if you don't show this part, if you don't show this arrow and this point, the interpretation of this slide could be quite different. But what the slide want to focus on is on this dip that has happened and why that dip happened, right? This is what the slide wants to focus on clearly. Okay, so just to repeat what this means. When you're showing data or showing any information like that, be clear in your head as to what is the insight or takeout that you want the audience to have from that data that you're showing. If you're not clear on what is the insight or the takeout that you want from that data that you're showing, uh, you're not going to be able to show the data properly using the right tool, and your audience again is going to get confused with it, right? So ascertain what the takeaway is before you do anything else. Okay, now these are chart samples. These chart samples show that different types of conclusions can be drawn from different data, right? Now here, when this chart highlights Q1, right? So if you want to highlight Q1 here, so you have all this data and you just have blue on this, right? So this really helps you focus on this thing. This chart emphasizes that Americas had the lowest revenue. So you're showing this entire data, but you highlight this because this is what you want the audience to really focus on. Um, in this case, you're showing here the focus is on when and where the revenue is declined, right? So you have your entire chart here, but you mark out the places where you really want your audience to focus because, again, you want to talk about where the revenue is declined, so on and so forth, right? So again, don't just show the data, but focus on what you want the audience to take out from that data. Here is you want the takeout to be the focus and takeout to be on Q1. Here you want it to be on the first thing. Here you want it on the kind of take on the declines and where they've happened, right? And that's what you want to do, because otherwise the audience is going to get confused when they look at it. And like I said, when you have information or you have a lot of data that you need to put on the slide, give your audience 10 to 15 seconds. If there's too much data, 30 seconds to really absorb everything on it and then start talking about that data. Right now, uh, pick the right tool. Once you are clear on the results you want to display, choose the most appropriate tool for displaying your data. The most frequently used graphs for business communication are pie, bar, and line graphs. Sometimes the best chart is no chart at all. If you only have one key message, or the big message is just a number, why put up the chart, right? So look at this case. In this, if you have just one piece of data, you don't need to put anything else. The thing that I often end up telling a lot of people when they're designing their slides is that the more slides you put in, the more information you put in, the more data you put in, the more the chances of your audience getting distracted from the objective that you want to meet, right? That's one thing. Number two, the more data, the more irrelevant information you put it, the more scope for irrelevant questions to come up from your audience, right? So you want to be very careful about what you put into your presentation. Now, besides what you put into your presentations, you may want to carry a lot of backup information with you, which you don't put into the presentation. Just in case somebody from the audience ends up asking something which is not on the presentation, you can always open that data up for them and keep that ready for them in one folder. But that doesn't mean that you put every piece of data on your presentation, right? That will harm you more than help you in any way. Okay, now choosing the right tools. This is again very important. This is the last piece of what we're going to discuss. Pie charts work for showing large differences in proportions, especially percentages. Use them when you want to show all the parts that make up the whole. Right now, here in this case, there are only three parts that are there, and the differences between them is large. So then a pie chart makes complete sense for you to show during this time. Okay, and then you want to show, different parts that make up the whole as well, right? So there are 2 points here. Okay, so when there are large differences and you want to show the different parts that make up the whole. Bar charts are visually more precise than pie charts because it actually shows you this thing, and can accommodate large data sets, right? So for example, if you have 10 things that you want to show here in this pie chart, then these slices become very small and you can barely see those slices then. But this, even if you have to show 10 things here, it's much easier for you to show that in a bar chart versus showing it in a pie chart, right? So that's what this means. And use them when you need to show precise relationships. What this means is, okay, how much is this got versus how much is this got, right? It becomes far easier for you to see that information like this. And then you're like, okay, so C is much higher than B and C, right? So this is how you use them to show the precise relationship between the three of them, right? So that's how you choose the right tools when you're showing the information. Okay, cool. With that, we come to the end of this very, very, very important topic. Um, Pause here right now and again make a note of your final takeaways from the session that you're going to take back to your coaching class. Arunima, would you like to add anything to our final slide?
No, just oops, just a moment. Yeah, just the fact that there are a lot of learning resources for this one. So
Yeah.
there is an entire reading list of great articles which go into, like I said, the more technical detail of how to do certain things.
Mm,
And whatever we've talked about, they give more examples, different sort of templates that you can play around with.
correct.
So yes, I'm hoping that it will help our people watching this create better presentations with the help of our, of course, our class and all the resources that I've shared with them.
Correct. And also the exercises that they're going to do, you're also going to mention that
Yes,
in the learning resources. Okay.
that's right.
Thank you very much, guys. We this is a long technical topic, but a very, very important one if you're going to be making content and making slides. I hope you've enjoyed it. See you. Bye bye. Thank you very much.